Douglas Hagelberg, and that period I'll be 40 to 50-year-old.
Like, what were the popular films, popular TV shows that you liked?
In the 80s, well, going to the movies was a big thing, but socialising was also. Um, Films in the 80s was Indiana Jones. They came out that period of time. Sophie's Choice, The Rain Man, Back to the Future films, they came out in the 80s. So, but the movies did play a big part in the 80s. I mean, that was a place where you met all the chicks and things like that. So it was good.
And what about fashion sense?
Fashion, that, I would struggle with that one a bit, but in the 80s, the men, I think, particularly wore shell suits, which was basically like a tracksuit, but it was very shiny, and you could get all colours in them. And the women, if I remember, they wore what they call them, leg warmers, these rolled up stocking things. They used up for dancing as well. And they used to use these half-cut gloves, which are like silk. And that was their style, like so. Oh, football was a big thing with me. Football was very popular because a lot of lads you went to school with played football, so and you kept with them when you left school, and you formulated teams, and consequently, the lads you went to school with, you took them into football with you. But football was the biggest thing. I played a little bit cricket, but football was my main thing. I was fortunate to have a trial with Nottingham Forest. I was down there for a month. But they said I wasn't a bad player, but I was a wee little bit small. So that was the end of my career. The only thing I was sad at the time was in that particular time I was there, Nottingham Forest had won the FA Cup, and I had the FA Cup in my hand, but I didn't have a camera. Well, people didn't carry cameras at that time, so that was, I was a bit sad about that, but never mind. If I had been a pro footballer, I might have married the woman I did, so I was quite happy with it turned out. It didn't really exist in the 80s. Hooligans, I mean, appreciated in your castle then, it wasn't all seats, you just stood. So the camaraderie was there for you. You stood next to each other, and I was no hooligans at all. Everybody was so friendly, and used to pass sweets to the opposition, and all of a sudden it just changed, it got ugly. It's I mean, from my point of view, today's world's a lot more violent than what it was in them days.
What house did you have in the 80s and who lived with you?
Well, I had a flat. We just had a two-bedroom flat when we first got married. And then Zoe came along, Abby's mum, and then Glenn came along. Because we had two children in the flat, we got a council house. Then we through Margie Thatcher, it's probably one of the best things she'd done, give her the right to buy. So lo and behold, we get to a little council house, garden back in front, 3-bedroom, and we paid £11,700 for that house. And we lived in it to getting close to 30 years now. That was the only opportunity I thought we got of Margie Thatcher. But having said that, it incurred the wrath of other people that had already bought the house. I mean, they were paying something like 15, 18,000 at that particular time, possibly more. So when they found out that people like myself were buying council houses for as much as 11.5 grand, it caused a bit wrath between people that was already private. But it was a good thing for the working class people. It really was.
And actually going into the right to buy scheme, do you think it's the good impact of it at the time has still lasted to today?
Well, you're still a bit anxious when somebody sells the house next door because you don't know who you're going to get, really. But consequently now, the rate for buying a council house now is still pretty sky high for a young couple now, and it's very difficult. But also when you had the right to buy, it ended the era of building council houses. So young couples that were getting married or whatever, they found it very difficult to get a house, and they're still finding problems today. So a lot of people now with the right to buy that bought council houses are now letting them out. So the big danger is again when they let them out, you don't know who you're going to get. So sometimes as soon as you see the let notice up going next door in the garden, you're naturally quite anxious straight away, saying, God, who's I going to get? Some tow rag or, you know. But it was good thing for the working class, like I said, own your own house, could do your own repairs and do what you want. It was good.
And could you talk about the community you were living within in the 80s as well?
Well, it was good when I was shifted up to New York. That's where we lived first in the council house, and you could swap houses then. Or someone wants to swap, and I've got a close friend which lives 2 doors away, and her next door, the lady next door, her brother was dying, so she wanted to be closer to her brother who thought she lived beside us, and we actually swapped houses. So eventually where I live now, I live next door to the guy I've been friends with for, I would say, over 50 years. So that was a good thing, but like I said, it's such a good thing. I've got the opportunity to get your own house.
So what jobs or job did you have during the 80s?
Well, I'll tell you, me working history as long as me on, because the building trade in the 60s was absolutely booming. One time on the River Tyne, the shipyards, you would have had 36,000 guys working in the yards. They were really booming. Loads of work. You could change your job for 10 bob a week, which you did. Or I'm going so-and-so to get more money off him. It was absolutely booming. But the shipyard's a very dangerous place to work because when they built the ships, you had scaffold around the ships, which you've obviously seen in photos, but there was no handrails. There was just three planks next to each other and no handrails. And you could be, when the ship was on the stocks, you could be 60 foot. And health and safety was non-existent. I mean, all these guys now that's dying with asbestosis, that was very prevalent in the shipyards at that time. In fact, we used to make snowballs with the asbestos and throw it at each other. But asbestos is only dangerous when it moves. If it stops tight, it's not a problem. But when it moves, that's when it's dangerous because you can't see it. It's the makers of asbestos you can't see in the air. They're the ones that do the damage. And I've lost quite a lot of friends with asbestosis. I've got it. We have a thing, plaque, which is a spin-off of asbestos. And most of the people that work in the yards, and we're still fighting that claim today to get money for plaque because they're just waiting for it, maybe getting it triggered off. But it was such a dangerous place. But the money at that particular time, because the shipyards were that busy. Oh, do you want to work Saturday? Yes, please. What about Sunday? I'm up for that as well. And the money was absolutely super. It was really good. So they were good times for work, but they were quite strict. If you were late for work, you were docking you 15 minutes. You were late again, 15 minutes, right, you're suspended for 2 days. But they were quite strict, but it was good at the time regarding money. Families were pretty well off, and particularly swan hunters. When you come out with swan hunters, when you run up the bank, you would see all the pay packets ripped open because the men would take money out their wage packet before they got home. And when they got home, they'd say, oh yes, I take money out the pay packet to the wife and I put it in the bank at work. But it wasn't. It was a little bit money extra for them. And when they got their pocket money off the wife, they had scored because they had extra money in the pocket. But they were good times. But it was dangerous, very dangerous. I was playing football at school on the Friday morning. I was 15, just come up 15. and a little boy came into the football ground, said something to the teacher said, Douglas, you're leaving school at 4 o'clock. You're starting work on Monday. I was 15, I was painter and decorator. So I started working, and I worked to him for about 18, 19, and fortunately he died, so the company folded. I just went, next day I had a job somewhere else. I worked on the buildings, Preston Grange, I worked there. Like I say, you could change your job, you could work anywhere. I was labouring for a while at William Press, working on the oil rigs. And I worked on the ship at Wallsend Slipway when it came back from the Falklands, the Sir Galahad. That was riddled with asbestosis. We were like wore spacesuits to go on board the ship. It was absolutely riddled. And on the Sir Galahad, a Scud missile had went through the port side of the ship, which is the left-hand side, in case you don't know, and it went out the starboard side. And no, it didn't go off, nobody was hurt, but the ship was absolutely mangled. So that was the Sir Galahad, which came back from the Falklands War. But in the wheelhouse area on the ship was all mangled, and the guys that were given the tour of the ship, they said, the captain of the ship's in there somewhere. We're kind of getting him up. We're kind of getting him just yet. But the area that was just so mangled, but he's in there somewhere. But that was the Sir Galahad. Was at Wallsend Slipway. So some of the stories from there, I tell you.
What was your specific job on the shipyard?
Painter and decorator. Basically, that was my job. But then I went into the union side of it, and I became a convener for the painters and the joiners and the sheet metal workers. And they sent for us one day and said, we've got a new chief executive came down from Scotland, called him Rabulla, and he decided that the companies that wanted to fetch their ships in for repair to the shipyards or whatever, they wanted to meet the union people to dictate or tell what kind of work could the crew do, because obviously when the ship came into dry dock, they had a crew, and they weren't going to pay the crew what to do nothing, because they say, well, if I fetch my ship to your dock, can the crew do this, can the crew do that, and you had to negotiate that. So they decided they sent us to America. I was over there for 13 days in New York. Then we went to New Orleans, then we came back up to Texas, to Houston, and all we did was the Americans deal business-wise, and that was their business. You go to dinner, and you talk, and the wives is there sitting there, but they're talking about ships, and if my crew comes with the ship, can they paint some of the deck work? Can they do some of the accommodation? Yeah, certainly, you fetch our ship and I'll see. So that was basically the end part of my job in the shipyards. Like, so it was quite interesting, but I had to come back to Wallsend and then meet up with the rest of the guys and say, well, look, I've been to America. This ship's coming in September, but mind the crew's going to do this. Oh, we always paying that. That's our job. I know it's your job. Well, we've got the boat coming. And I had to make that kind of decision in America and come back and tell them. So it was a bit pressure at the time, but I enjoyed it. It was good.
Was it a good union? What was the union like?
It was UCAT. Sorry.
It's okay. What was the union like, and what were the benefits from being within it?
Well, you met a lot of good people, but you had a lot of decisions to make. And I was looking at for something like maybe 30, 40 guys. Women that were married, they had children, and they want to see things their way, and you've got to negotiate that you've got to see it my way, or collectively you've got to see it the whole way it is, what's best for the whole union. So it was a difficult time, but I enjoyed it, and I think really if I had stuck at it, I would have probably become a full-time union official, but I decided otherwise.
Council.
I applied to the council, I rung the guy and he says, we're not starting anybody at the moment, but we'll take a name and address. And I said, oh, I'm Douglas Hagelberg. Is that you, Dougie? Yes, who's this? It's Norman Mitchison. I used to play football with him. He says, come Monday and start on Monday, 8 o'clock. So I've stopped. I knew it was going to be casual. And then he came one day and he said, I've been told I can keep 6 guys on permanent. You know, I was working with this other guy. He says, you're the first two I'm going to ask. So I come permanent pay now with North Tyneside. And then that's to be a charge hand. And I went from there to supervisor. I must have been a good talker, I think, at the time. So I supervised there for about 18 years, which was good. I supervised all the painting, the schools, old people's homes, all the toilets in North Tyneside, all the handrails, if you think the handrails on the seafront, St Mary's Lighthouse. So I supervised that. I was going up the stairs twice a day at St Mary's Lighthouse, 137 steps a day. I was fit as a lot. It was good, but I enjoyed it really good. Abby's grandma, she worked for the council as well, and she was a cook supervisor. So we had a pretty good life. It was really good. Oh, probably a bad thing, especially Wallsend, because the shipyards at that time, you got an hour for your dinner. In Swan Hunters, Wiggins, the Neptune Yard, and in that hour, some guys went for a pint of beer, and that's unbelievable, health and safety. But people went into all the shops in Wallsend. When the shipyards closed, that was gone, and Wallsend just died. I mean, there were shops like Woolworths, popular shop, closed. You know, it really affected Wallsend, and that was probably part of it with the Maggie Thatcher theme. She was very unpopular, you know, with the working class people, I'm afraid. Like I say, the only thing she really did was give her the right to buy. But, you know, you go back to the miners' strike and things like that, and really killed off. Well, Maggie Thatcher was adamant we were going to be a rich country because all of the oil business took off with the oil rigs just up the coast of Aberdeen. And she said, oh, we're going to be the richest country in the world. Until Scotland said, what do you mean you're going to be the richest country? It's in Scotland, not England. And she was adamant she was going to get the coal from Russia because she thought it was a lot cheaper. And the president, the NUM, National Union of Miners, Arthur Scargill, he tipped, he said, close the pits. And eventually it did start to happen. And I had several of my colleagues who were policemen, and they made an absolute fortune when the strike was on, because some people decided, I can't afford to be on strike. They went back to work, so they had to be escorted into the pits because the rest of the miners were waiting for them coming. You know, I mean, they're breaking down the barrier, calling them blacklegs, God knows what. Families were severed, families, brothers. I know 2 brothers I haven't spoke since, because one broke the barrier. He had kids. He said, I can't afford to be on strike. He went to work. He broke through the barrier, and the other one stood out here. So his families were absolutely broken with the miners' strike. But it was a terrible time. I mean, house fights, people killed. There were absolutely naughty some of the things they got up to. I mean, excuse me if I sound a bit rude saying this, but they used to get eggshells and drill them, put urine in and throw them at the police and at the blacklegs, and some of the tricks they got up to was unbelievable, I tell you. It was a terrible time. Like, windows are getting put in at night time in your house, and I'm pleased I wasn't involved in the pits at that particular time, I tell you. It was terrible.